the application is submitted on the first day of the tranche or the last day of the tranche, they'll all be processed at the same time once the tranche closes. That's how the system operates. You'll eventually get an approval, and for fixed investments, you cannot start the investment until you have your approval got. For mobile investments, you can carry out the investment and get the equipment once the application is actually submitted.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode, I'm joined by Teagasc Scheme Support Unit Specialist Seamus Nolan to get an update on the Targeted Agricultural Modernisation Scheme, known as TAMS, to find out what items are eligible for grants to make various improvements on farms. Seamus, you're very welcome. Can you give an update on TAMS?
TAMS is kind of started in 2023, so we're kind of halfway through the 5-year budget cycle for it now. There have been about 47,000 applications over 12 schemes kind of to date. The last tranche closed there on the 6th of June. So up until that stage, it was about 47,000 applications. There's an overall budget of about 370 million for the scheme. And there's about, I think it's about 70 million has been paid out currently to farmers, so that's kind of a rough guide as to where we are at the minute.
And who's eligible to apply for the TAMS grants?
I suppose the basic eligibility requirement across all the schemes is that you have to have a BIS application with 5 hectares on it. That's kind of the basic requirement. Other than that, then I suppose there are specific requirements for certain investments. So if you're looking for a bovine related investment, you have to have bovine animals. We say if you're looking for bovine fencing, you have to have bovine animals. If you're looking for a sheep related investment, you have to have sheep. Equine related investments, you'll have to have equine. So there's some of the other criteria. Obviously, if you're looking for a tillage related investment, you have to have 15 hectares of eligible crops. But the general criteria is 5 hectares on a BIS application, and obviously that you have a herd identifier as well.
And then depending on what you're actually applying for, there are different payment ceilings.
Yeah, there are different payment ceilings. I suppose this is where people get confusing, and some schemes have their own individual investment ceiling. So we say the likes of the solar scheme and the low emission slurry spreading scheme have their own investment ceiling. So whatever investment you carry out under those schemes doesn't affect your investment ceiling under other schemes. The new nutrient storage scheme has its own investment ceiling as well. And for some of the other schemes, then the likes of the health and safety scheme, farm safety scheme as we call it, the animal welfare and nutrient storage scheme, young farmer scheme and women farmer scheme, and those schemes, they have a combined ceiling. So if you spend, we'll say 20,000 under the farm safety scheme and you're an individual, your overall ceiling is 90,000. That means you have only 70,000 left then to apply under the animal welfare and nutrient storage scheme. So yeah, it's important to remember, I suppose, that an individual has a ceiling of 90,000 for these schemes. A company is the very same as an individual. A company is treated as a legal individual, and in order to get the enhanced ceiling then of 160,000, you have to have a registered farm partnership. And that's maybe where some people get caught, in that it has to be a registered farm partnership to get the enhanced ceiling. A joint herd number is not eligible for the enhanced ceiling of 160,000. A joint herd number would only be eligible for an individual ceiling of 90,000.
For farmers that have a fragmented farm, can handling facilities be funded for outblocks, be it fixed options or portable?
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a very attractive grant, I suppose, from the point of view that it's under the farm safety scheme. So the farm safety scheme is funded at 60%. So and animal handling facilities, both fixed and mobile, are available under that at 60%. So if you have we say even if it's a rented out farm, you can apply for mobile equipment, for mobile handling equipment, so a mobile crush and mobile penning. If it's an owned or leased block and you want to put a fixed investment on it, you can apply for a fixed animal enclosure and crush, and you can also get the associated farm safety elements to go with that, the head scoop, and you can get the weighing scales, etc. To go with those. Now the thing about the The mobile investments, obviously, there's no issue with planning permission there. The fixed investment is one of the few fixed investments that the department don't look for planning permission for is the animal enclosure and crush. They don't look for that at application stage. But what they do say is that, if an issue turns up in relation to planning, we say somebody objects to it at claim stage or something like that, that they will look for planning at that stage. But in general, they don't require planning permission for those.
In relation to other options, Seamus, replacement of slats is also an interest on a lot of farms currently. What options are available?
That's a big one as well. I suppose what makes it attractive is that it's under the 60% farm safety scheme as well. So basically, if you have old single slats or damaged gang slats, or manhole covers or whatever, you can apply to get those replaced under the 60% grant rate. Now, I suppose it's important to remember that it's a fixed investment. So the difference between a fixed investment and a mobile investment, I suppose, to clarify that, is that a fixed investment, you cannot carry out the investment until you have approval got. Okay. With a mobile investment, once you have the application submitted prior to approval, you can go out and you can get the equipment or whatever it is. It's mostly equipment that's covered under mobile investments. So the trouble is, I suppose, that we will come across now and again with slats is that during the winter time, farm goes out some morning and the slats are broken. Now he wants to apply for TAMS to get the grant to do that. He can't really, because he has to wait until his approval got before he can apply or before he can purchase the slats and put them in. It's important as well. One of the big obstacles to the scheme is that you will not get TAMS for any investment associated with a building that has an internal agitation point. So if you have an internal agitation point in a shed, you won't get the grant to replace the slats in it. You can also get a grant to extend the tank outside the shed to bring out the agitation point, or put in a circulation system or an aeration system to agitate it. But under no circumstances will you get a grant where there's an internal agitation point in a shed or in a shed that has a common airspace.
In relation to calf housing and equipment, there's a lot of investment involved there in the last number of years, Seamus. What investments are available that farmers can apply for?
Well, obviously you can apply under animal housing for the calf house itself, But apart from that, in terms of equipment, I suppose maybe you're asking about, Catherine. Yeah, the computerized calf feeding equipment is there, and also the milk carts is there. Now, they are available for the ordinary farmer, we'll say at 40% of the animal welfare and nutrient storage scheme, but for the young farmer, they're available at 60% to them. And that's an important point, I suppose, maybe, is that if you apply under the wrong scheme for the investment for the wrong rate, it can't be changed subsequently. You'll have to reapply. So some people make the mistake in that we say they meant to apply for the young farmer scheme for a 60% grant rate for something, but they end up submitting the application under the animal welfare and nutrient storage scheme. The animal welfare and nutrient storage scheme is only ever a 40% grant rate. So if you submit the application under that, it can't be transferred to the young farmer capital investment scheme. You have to resubmit your application in relation to that.
And the automatic calf feeders, they're eligible under the young farmer scheme at the 60%?
They are, yes.
You touched on it there with regard to the housing option for farmers that were interested in building a new slatted shed. What TAMS grants are available, or be it calf housing with no tank, what options are available?
Well, the calf housing is straightforward enough. It's there under the animal welfare. Like you can apply for calf housing with penning or calf housing with no penning. That's available for the ordinary farmer at 40%. For a young farmer can get it at 60%. I suppose the department initially announced TAMS was 10 schemes in TAMS, and we've mentioned a lot of them there: the solar, the low emission, animal welfare, young farmer, women farmer, tillage, etc. Earlier on this year, then they introduced the nutrient storage scheme. So that's an additional scheme with its own independent ceiling of 90,000 for an individual or 160,000 for a registered farm partnership, and that's at 60%, and that covers basically nutrient storage. And the main one that would be of interest to people there is mass concrete tanks. So for a farmer who's considering building a slab shed at the minute, we'll say an ordinary farmer who's only eligible for the 40% grant rate under the Animal Welfare and Nutrient Storage Scheme, they can now apply under that scheme for the tank at 60%. Okay, so they will get 60% on the tank, and they also then have their 90,000 ceiling to push the roof over the tank, if you know what I mean, because the nutrient storage scheme has its own independent ceiling. So they have 90,000 to spend on a tank, and they have potentially 90,000 to spend on the roof to go over it. Likewise, a young farmer or a registered farm partnership, um, we say with a young farmer has 160,000 to spend on storage at 60%, and they have 160,000 to push the roof over the tank then if they want to as well. Now, in relation to that, I suppose that there's been a lot of talk about planning exemptions, etc., in relation to storage. Uh, we've heard nothing about it recently. Now, some people still think it's going to come. When it's going to come, I don't know. But if there is an exemption, I think you will still have to get an exemption from the county council. You mightn't have to go for full planning or for the full procedure of planning permission, but you will still have to apply to the county council for a planning exemption, because they're not just going to let people put tanks wherever they want, in and there'll be some kind of regulation on it. Now, what I would say to people is that if you were considering putting a shed over that tank, while you might get an exemption for the tank, okay, you will not get an exemption for the structure to go over it. So if you're thinking that way, you're as well just go ahead and apply for the planning permission for the whole lot now, and not be waiting for that exemption to come, if it does come at all.
You mentioned there a few minutes ago the solar options. What solar options are worth considering for dry stock farmers?
The main one is obviously the Solar Capital Investment Scheme, which is a 60% grant rate, has its own independent ceiling, where you can obviously get solar panels for the holding. Now, what makes it attractive here, I suppose, from a dry stock farmer's perspective, the dairy farmer is slightly different because they generally have a big energy draw anyway. But in a lot of suckler farms, I suppose the energy draw mightn't be huge, but you can use the energy consumed in one dwelling um, in the calculations as to the size of a system that you can put in. So the size of the system that you can put in is determined by your energy usage in the previous 12 months. So in that situation, your dwelling house will probably going to make up the most of it, and whatever the farm uses on top of that as well. Now, the panels can't be installed on the dwelling house. They have to be installed on a building with some sort of an agricultural use, or they can be ground mounted. Okay, but the electricity can feed into the dwelling house, and that leaves it very attractive um, from anybody's perspective, because they can essentially get a 60% grant on a solar system that can be utilized in the house, and predominantly the energy from that will be used in the house. Apart from that, I suppose, Catherine, outside the solar investment scheme, there is you can get a grant under the Animal Welfare and Nutrient Storage Scheme, or the Young Farmer Scheme, or the Women Farmer Scheme for solar electric fencers, and the solar water pumps available under those as well. But they are outside the solar capital investment scheme.
So farmers can also apply for those, Seamus?
Yes, also apply for those, yeah.
It's a distant thought at the moment with regard to the storm in the spring. For farmers that are interested, what are the options there with regard to purchasing generators under the TAMS scheme?
The option still remains there for farmers, even though the department had a kind of an emergency tranche for about 3 weeks in March, where they were only accepting applications for generators and mulchers and wood chippers and all that sort of stuff at the time. But that tranche has come and gone. But any farmer can still apply for a generator under TAMS, under the dairy equipment scheme. It's where it is, and that may put some people off. They may think that only dairy farmers are eligible for it, but no, all farmers are eligible for it. Now, the costings are based on a PTO generator. You can get a diesel or a petrol powered one, but the costings, I suppose, are based on the costings of a PTO driven generator. So that's still there. It hasn't changed, and there's no immediate plans to close that off yet to applicants.
And for anyone that may not have already gone through the process of applying for a TAMS grant before, how does it work, and how do they go about putting in an application form?
There's 12 schemes there under TAMS at the minute. There's 11 of them are all online. Okay, so it's an online application is the first thing. Unless it's a very basic enough application, I'd suggest you contact your advisor to get a bit of advice because they would be more familiar with the system. Um, so the first thing is, I suppose, is to decide what you want to invest in. The second thing is that make sure it's applied for under the correct scheme. As I mentioned previously, instead of applying for the 40% grant rate when you should be applying for a 60% grant rate, etc. So the next thing then, I suppose, is that make sure the application is submitted. So once the application is submitted, the department will not start processing those applications until the tranche is closed. So the next tranche closes on the 5th of September. The last one closed on the 6th of June. So they're normally run every 3 months. So it doesn't matter whether the application is submitted on the first day of the tranche or the last day of the tranche. They'll all be processed at the same time once the tranche closes. That's how the system operates. You'll eventually get an approval. And for fixed investments, you cannot start the investment until you have your approval got. For mobile investments, you can carry out the investment and get the equipment once the application is actually submitted.
That's great. Thanks very much. Some great information there, Seamus, with regard to the different options that's available. And as you highlighted there, the importance of applying for the right scheme to ensure that you're allowed the right amount of grant for each of the applications.
Yeah, that's it. And it's important when we get queries all the time in relation to that an application has been submitted under the wrong scheme. Can it be changed? No, it can't. It has to be reapplied on. So it is a mistake where people are made. See, the thing about it is, I suppose, and I'll finish on this maybe, is that all investments under the Animal and Welfare and Nutrient Storage Scheme are available under the Young Farmer Capital Investment Scheme as well, and under the Women Farmer Capital Investment Scheme. But to get the higher rate, you have to apply for the scheme that attracts the higher rate, and that situation is the Women Farmer Scheme and the Young Farmer Scheme. Okay, the system won't stop a young farmer applying under the Animal Welfare and Nutrient Storage Scheme for the 40% grant. Okay, so that's where the mistake is often made. So it's important to apply under the correct scheme.
That's great. Thanks very much, Seamus.
No problem.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Seamus for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.